stars. We like somebody that we can kind of objectify is the word, you know. And so I think, you know, for a gay man, they want this hot little girl that they can kind of look at like their little doll. If I was like a Abercrombie & Fitch model doing music, I probably would have a different fan base with the boys because I'd be objectified as this like man meat thing. I'm not really that guy, you know. So it's a different appeal.
But you might not cross over as well to like all of the, you know, 40-year-old moms who are absolutely in love with you
that
as
is
well,
true.
You know?
That is true.
There's like this really. Are we rolling, by the way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knew? This isn't part of anything that I've heard, but there's this really ambiguous sort of attraction, you know, like that people, and for myself as well, that it's sort of like, I don't think that it's I want to sleep with you, but tell me this is too much information, but there's a really, really strong identification and sort of like connection, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think if you looked different physically and if you fit into the stereotype of, you know, like a, you know, I don't know, a much sort of smaller, thinner, fairy-ish type boy, that maybe that wouldn't exist, you know? Like maybe,
I don't know, or if I was the other end of the spectrum and I was like a big, beefy,
super bear
like,
or something.
like, you know, Chelsea bodybuilder type boy, you know, that would be a different experience as well. And men especially are so visual. They're so visual. I mean, it's all about the look, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. I don't get it. I'll never figure it out. It's very interesting, but you know, I'm making generalizations of like what I see, like the super fans that I interact with, and I know that there's more casual fans, you know, that I might not see at certain events, and so.
Do you ever feel objectified or fetishized by your fans?
Yeah, I've seen some like fan fiction. That's strange.
You got to be careful when you Google that shit, man.
I've stopped. I became aware of it like early. Saw a couple things. Was like, okay, that's enough. I don't need to see that ever again. It's just a little too weird. Yeah, a little too weird. One that I read was actually kind of hot.
Reading about yourself?
Well, no, it was the situation that they put me in with somebody else, and I was like, ooh, I'm getting all steamy.
So the new album and the new single as well, Trespassing.
Yeah.
I assume that's not an accidental metaphor for how you sort of understand your own position in the world. And
yeah, I mean, when I got in the studio with Pharrell, I was super like nervous and intimidated, and we started talking about life, and he was asking me some questions, and I was telling him that I felt like an outsider, and that I felt like I didn't feel like I was a part of the music community. And I wanted to be, and I felt like I just wanted to like bust in there and like do my thing in kind of a rebellious, aggressive way, and just in life in general. My history has always felt a little bit like that. I've always felt a little bit like on the outskirts of something, and I'm always craving a sense of community. So we talked about that, and I think he found the way in which he identified with me as being somebody that's been different or having to kind of prove themselves, and we wrote Trespassing together. And then sonically, you know, he was very much, you know, interested in putting me in this kind of early 80s Queen kind of vibe. I mean, that was kind of he's like, that's where you need to be, it's going to be great. So.
And it worked.
And it worked out really well. It's one of my favorite songs on the album, for sure.
It's got a great thumping bass line to it.
Yeah, and it's like, it's what I love about it is that it's not trendy. It's not what you've heard on the radio lately, and it's not following a formula, and there's something really refreshing about that, and totally terrifying to the record company. But it's a great song, regardless if it's commercially successful or not. I think artistically it really makes a big impact, you know?
I've been thinking lately a lot about how kids, when they're really young, don't censor themselves until people start reacting in a certain way, and then they sort of realize that there are boundaries that they are not supposed to cross. Do you remember the first time that you sort of realized, either musically or as a person, that you were crossing some sort of invisible line in the sand?
I mean, I think that with the, like, right after Idol, when I did the tour, we like had a big tour with all the Idols, and it was like a big stadium tour around the States, and I was doing like a David Bowie medley at the end of I had a little set. I did David Bowie, I did a song by Muse, I did Mad World, I did Led Zeppelin, Whole Lotta Love. And by the end of the set, with the Bowie stuff, I was doing Let's Dance and Fame and the kind of sexy stuff that he did. And I started getting into it, and I was dancing around a lot and kind of gyrating and being kind of nasty. And all of it, there's like women throwing bras, sex toys. I was like, what the hell is going on? that's where all of a sudden I went, oh, is this what I am to my fans? Oh, interesting. I didn't really see that coming. I didn't realize that I was going to be this kind of objectified, like, it was like Tom Jones or something. It was weird with all the bras. And so that kind of, like, even before the album was finished, my first album, like, that's what I thought I was supposed to be to them. And what I learned maybe sort of the hard way is that the general public did not see me that way. Only my core fans from Idol saw me that way. And when I went and I did the AMAs, and I thought I was giving them what they were asking for, and I got real raunchy, and I had like media storm about it, and I had people complaining, and the network had to censor me, and all this stuff happened, and I went, oh God, you know, not that I regret doing it, and not that it was necessarily it wasn't a misrepresentation of myself, because it was me up there, but I think I got carried away with what I thought they wanted instead of sticking to what I needed to do. And you know, that's being a performer. It's always a balance between those two things. You know, you are an entertainer, so you have to entertain the people and consider them. But as an artist, you also have to follow your instincts and your own, you know, your own angle on things. So it was definitely like an interesting kind of polarizing moment. And it also opened my eyes really wide to the double standards that exist in the music industry, especially in the States. I mean, all of a sudden I was like, oh right, because I'm a gay dude. I can't do any of that stuff right now. I mean, I can, but it ain't gonna work. It's not gonna fly on the, you know, for the general public. So it was a learning experience, you know.
What do you think it is, or what do you see as being the thing that makes you somehow threatening to people? I mean, is it the cross-gender coding? Is it male sexuality in and of itself?
Man, I don't know. I think there's a lot of different things. I think part of it has to do with being, I mean, from a sexuality identity kind of standpoint, yeah, I like embrace like certain like androgynous like fashion sense, which to me is just kind of interesting. But to some people, they just really can't wrap their heads around it. It's like so weird to them. And it's funny to me because if you look at like the history of like rock and roll and pop music, it's like we've had plenty of artists that have been kind of all over the place. You know, you have your Bowie and Michael Jackson and Prince and Boy George and like all these artists, but this was also in the 70s and the 80s. And things are different now. And it isn't as, that's not a popular, trendy fashion statement to make anymore. It's kind of a throwback thing. So maybe that's part of it. It's just not new or you know, happening as much anymore. I think, you know, music has become like almost a democratic, you know, by the people for the people situation, whereas back then the record companies really kind of held the puppet strings and were in charge of presenting certain artists to the public. So things have shifted in that regard too. Tastemakers don't, it's harder to come by tastemakers and people that are really pushing the boundaries in music because the record labels are really concerned right now about the commerce of it. So it's tough.
And yet, I mean, your record label gave you a shitload of trust.
They did.
After you came out of Idol. You know, I don't know anybody else who sort of managed to, quote, get away with all the stuff that you did.
Yeah,
were you surprised by that?
I noticed that I was getting a lot of support, and that felt good. It felt really good. But, you know, hindsight's much clearer than being in the moment. I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I was like, what are we doing? You know, and you know, the thing that you forget really easily, too, is I was on a show, and I was doing a song every week, and that's how people knew me. They knew me by singing other people's songs, and that was pretty much it. Little bits of video here and there, me smiling, being a nice guy. That's what they knew. The minute you expand that, and all of a sudden I'm trying to, like, really express original artistic ideas and fashion and doing interviews and talking, it's like it opened up a whole other thing. And what I kind of didn't connect was point A to point B for these people, and I think maybe like the AMA thing was a bit of a shock. Like maybe you have to ease into something like that, you know, instead of just, I think some people felt like it was like a switch, like a 1-2 switch kind of, you know, and I didn't really even think about it that way, you know.
Because they hadn't seen the progression.
They hadn't seen the progression. They weren't at a lot of those people that watch that on TV weren't at the tour seeing dildos thrown at my face, you know. But also, you know, so the threatening thing is, I don't know. I think I don't know if women find me threatening. I don't think they do. I think maybe that's to my advantage. I think maybe some men find me threatening. I think maybe certain straight men may be uncomfortable with some of the things that I embrace, you know, the kind of androgyny and the how kind of upfront I am about things. And then I think some gay men might just not, I don't know what it is. I don't know what, maybe some of them do love it. And then I think maybe some of them think, oh, you know, oh, he's trying too hard, or, oh, you know, but he looks crazy. I don't like the way he looks because he looks like fag and he doesn't feel like, I feel like a lot of the gay community is very black and white.
Yeah.
They want the roles very clear cut. At least this is my experience in LA. And LA is kind of a big gay scene, but it feels a lot of, you know, you're a top or you're bottom, you know, and your identity needs to associate with that sexual position, literally. You know, oh, you're this, you're that, you're the other thing. People like to get boxed in and defined by, you know, their sex role or their which gender they identify with more. And I identify with both genders. You know, visually, fashion-wise, I love that mix. I love looking pretty. I like that vibe. But I'm also a dude in many regards, you know? So it's like, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out my identity too. I just wish there was a little bit more of a celebration in the community of people that didn't feel the need to adopt one or the other. It feels a bit black and white. But that's also the city I'm in. You know, when I go and visit New York, New York's an example of a city where I feel like there's a little bit more of a gray area. Toronto feels like it's a little more of a gray area. Certain cities are a little different, you know, but being an American, it's a wholly different, it's a different thing.
Whole other thing.
Yeah.
If the world were to truly embrace, you know, the Adam Lambert ethos, what would that world look like for you?
I don't know. I hopefully very, very, like, a lot of variety. I mean, my, like, circle of friends, for example, I have, like, a very diverse, kind of broad, you know, cross-section of people. Ages, genders, races. I like a mix. I think it's much more interesting. But obviously there's, you know, tension that arises from that. So, but I would love, you know, and I know it sounds very, it's a small world, but you know, why not?
Yeah.
You know, color it up. That would be great. That'd be really great.
Diversity.
Yeah, diversity. And like the coexistence of it all too. Like, as I've gotten older, I like have more like straight guy friends, and like that's a really cool connection when it's comfortable and it's like just cool and you're just friends with that person. You know, it's when I was younger growing up, I didn't have any straight guy friends, and it was a very strange, distant, kind of intimidating connection for me. The only people that I had really in my life were like my, you know, my father and my brother. So as I got more comfortable in my own skin and started making those kinds of friendships, it was really interesting to me. It's like, oh, cool. That's not weird at all.
Yeah.
You know?
And just who you choose to sleep with doesn't necessarily affect who you're friends with.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know, that's the thing about, you know, when you're young and you're looking for identity, especially if you're in an alternative sexuality, it becomes your identity. And it's hard to kind of get over that because these patterns they're built into the way we are, you know? And I know for gay men, and maybe gay women as well, I think there's a certain amount of arrested development that happens, you know, at least in my generation. I think that it is changing for these younger kids, but in my generation and the ones before me, it was very much you're closeted and you're not having the same experiences as most adolescents are having, at least not in the open. And so you get into your 20s when you're like on your own and you're able to go to bars and other social events where there's, you know, gay people, and you're learning these things that most people learned at 14, and you're learning it at 22.
Yeah.
So there's this like backwards thing happening.
Yeah. It's growing up all over again.
Yeah. And I still feel like, you know, at 30 years old, I still feel like I'm learning a lot about relationships that maybe my peers learned, you know, my straight peers learned when they were, you know, 18.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. It's a challenge.
Now, definitely, I'm getting the move to wrap this up, but over the past, you know, couple years, there's definitely been a concerted effort on your part to keep the focus on the music and what you're, you know, the artistic content that you're creating, as opposed to who you happen to sleep with. Totally understandably.
Yeah.
Outlaws of Love was on this album, though, which is
Yeah.
obviously very, you know, a very overt statement about equality.
Right.
And the one thing I want to end on is there's a YouTube clip of you performing at a marriage equality benefit in DC and speaking very eloquently about the subject. And one of the, I think it's a top-rated comment underneath it, reads, Thank you, Adam, for bringing awareness of the struggles in the gay community. I would never have been involved or support any LGBT causes if it were not for Adam. I'm a better person because of Adam Lambert.
Aww.
What does it feel like to
I have
read
a
that?
brigade of fruit flies. The Glamberts are like the ultimate fruit fly.
But I mean, to know that you have that kind of, the power to trigger somebody's thought process changing.
That's
How does it
amazing.
feel?
That's a huge reward. And it's something that's been echoed throughout. I mean, I met a woman who handed me a letter, and I read it on my tour bus. This was on the first tour, and she said that, you know, she was like a conservative Mormon, and she like had no acceptance for the gay lifestyle, but was a real fan of my work, and it challenged her to like learn about, you know, the gay lifestyle and the community, and she made friends with her hairdresser, and now they're buddies, and it was a really nice thing to hear that someone was willing to like put their ignorance aside and educate themselves and get over their fear, you know. That's a huge reward. It's huge. And the thing that I've you know, been learning to accept and open up about is I always have wanted to be really open about my sexuality and be an open book about it. I think the difficult thing that I had to learn was that being a celebrity and doing so and dealing with media is a very tricky process, because at least in the States, the media, all they want to focus on is the sexuality. You know, I can have an interview that's like an hour-long interview, and we cover everything, and the headline is only about gay, and it's gay, gay, gay. Everything's a gay slant. And that's why I started getting very frustrated. I thought, no, I want to talk about that stuff, but why does everything have to come back to that every time? That's not how I live my life, you know? So it's a tough thing to navigate, because I think maybe even some of the gay community might look at some of my interviews or choices or material and say, okay, why is he only talking about being gay? That's annoying. We already know. We don't need to hear anything else about it. And then the next guy or girl might look at the situation and say, he's not doing enough. You know, he's a gay guy. He needs to be like waving the flag here. He's got the opportunity. And it's been like, I don't know.
You can't win.
I can't win. I don't know. You know, I think at the end of the day, you just have to just be who you are. But dealing with media is an interesting skill. You know, and certain people in the media, like yourself, like, you know where they're coming from, and it's like you can have a more balanced conversation. You know, gay media tends to be really, really great. When I do, you know, gay publications, I feel like they get what I'm talking about, and they don't turn it into this kind of, they don't qualify it so much, and they don't blow it out of proportion, and they don't necessarily hype it up so much. It's more just kind of like, you know, this guy is gay like you, let's talk to him about real things. Whereas some other media, it's like they have to explain what gay is to people. I'm like, do people know what gay is? What do you have to define it over and over again for? So
sorry, I've kept you.
I could go on and on and on and on.
Next time we'll get an hour.
Yeah, fuck.